Come on up, guys. Hi, everyone. How was lunch? Good? Have a seat. So my name's Sarah Francis. I am a product director at YouGov, which some of you may have heard of. We're a political polling and market research company. And my job is to lead our panel products team. So those are the products that our 22 million members around the world interact with. They share data with us, they tell us their opinions, their thoughts, their beliefs. And I've got an amazing team that you'll hear about today. And with me, I've got Ankur. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay, awesome. So I take care of product partnerships and engineering at a company called Perkbox. Perkbox is a global rewards and benefit company. We serve employees at 79 countries across the world. I've been doing product management for almost 17 years now. I hope that we are able to keep you awake after good lunch.
Hi, my name is Aya. I work for Warner Brothers Discovery, specifically around Harry Potter. I don't know if you've been to the studio tours in Leavesden, but I do manage a product portfolio for not just Leavesden, but also a VR experience in New York, also Hollywood Tours, which is also a tour, but not dedicated to Harry Potter. So other IPs that we have, Friends and Gilmore Girls and other things, I think. I've not actually been there myself. And also we will be opening a new studio, Harry Potter studio in Tokyo next year. So the digital portfolio for across all of those things.
Thanks very much, Aya. Okay, so the first thing we're going to talk about today is actually what makes a product team successful. So I'm going to start with you, Aya. Would you like to tell us what that is?
Yeah, I think it's definitely the people, I think so. But also I think it's about making sure that, you know, the wider stakeholders really understand what we do and what we bring to the table. I have distributed teams, so, you know, I have the added challenge of time zones and not, you know, people being offline at certain times, so that's really hard as well. But I think, you know, and so clear communication is key, and having that cohesivity and brings really high morale and, you know, and my team being proud of what they produce, I think is really important.
Yeah. Ankur, anything to add?
Yeah, so I'll just extend to what I was saying. So obviously people is the key, right? What kind of people become the part of your product team in the kind of culture they get germinated in? Is it an outcome-driven culture, or is it a kind of culture where they're being told what to do? Is it a culture, are they kind of people who have similar kind of skill sets? Like, are they all have design-led thought process, or do they have complementary skill sets where they can learn from each other, or do they have low ego to learn from each other? I think that, to me, drives a lot of success amongst each other. A strong feedback loop amongst each other.
Yeah.
Does as a leader, product team has a strong and immediate feedback loop amongst each other. So yes, people plus what kind of culture does companies drive? I
agree, and I think it's important that the, you know, you said outcome driven.
Yeah.
And I think it's important that the wider business understand that, the wider stakeholders understand that, and not tell us as in what the solution is, but actually what they're trying to achieve from a business point of view and a product point of view. I find that that's really important, and sometimes it is a challenge because obviously people have, you know, some people have very strong opinions, and I think that the product team and, you know, with technology, you know, can provide the right recommendations and solutions based on, you know, their business requirements.
Yeah. Getting the alignment on the goals
Yes.
front is really crucial.
Absolutely.
And how have you found it works well to do that? What processes do you use to get that alignment early on?
I think it's involving like technology and the business and the wider stakeholders from the start, as opposed to you know, having working in different silos. I think is key in my view, and I think it's benefited to be clear about, what the constraints are from a technological standpoint as well, I think, because not everyone understands that.
Yeah.
So whatever process, in my mind, whatever process you build, that should build predictability and transparency across the stakeholder. And those stakeholders could be customers in a SaaS company, or it could be internal stakeholders like customer success or sales. If you can start building predictability for them as a product manager and not leave that onus on to sales to understand, in this case sales, but it could be customers, right? That to me is a good successful process. Now that could be knowing what customers, what the teams which are closest to the customers think. Like one of the things which we do at Perkbox is our customer care teams are known as customer happiness teams, and we often pair our engineers, product managers, designers with them for a few hours a day to help them understand what these teams are going through and what exactly happens behind the scene. It also eliminates this curse of knowledge, because we product managers think just like we know the product, everybody else should know the product, or everybody else knows the product. So I think any process which can build transparency is.
Yeah, I've heard it said that obviously we think that everybody is in our heads and understands our products the same way that we do. And you've not explained it clearly enough until you're sick of hearing what your message and your mission is, because you've said it so many times to other people. I want to build on something you said earlier. You said about having a team where they challenge each other is really, really important. What role do you think leaders like yourself play in creating a culture where your teams feel free to challenge each other, where they feel safe to do that?
I think one is definitely what I spoke about, that when, let's say, when somebody comes to the product team and says, hey, you know what, this is a solution which I'm looking for, or this is a solution which customer is looking for, does product team has enough ability to push back? Do they have enough ability? And pushback doesn't necessarily need to be saying no, because you have come back with a solution. Solution can come from anywhere. But can they push back using data? It could be qualitative, anecdotal, or quantitative. But can they push back with a proper rationale, saying that, hey, you know what, this is a great solution, but the same problem can be solved. But what is the problem? Or the same problem can be solved in multiple different ways. Let's go back to the drawing board and try to solve it. Do they have enough autonomy to do that? Can they push back right at the CEO level?
Yeah, that makes sense. Aya, have you got any experiences where you've created that kind of culture where your teams feel free to push back?
Yeah, I think so. I like to think I did. I have done. I think it's on the first. I think when we get requests or trying to solve problems, and create that environment of teams wanting to solve that problem. And also to be proud of what they, are trying to resolve. It might not be a problem, but it might be something else. But also to understand, not just how and what, but why. What are you trying to solve, and why is that? And I think that empowers teams, not just product managers, but like tech teams, developers, designers. I think, in my view, and I think it's also I think that it's part of product manager's role or owner's role to, without sounding condescending, to educate the wider stakeholders in the business, and not provide a solution on the fly, as in what is it that I'm actually trying to do or achieve? What's the pain point? Rather than saying I want a particular feature, it's like what's the actual business requirement? Yes, exactly. I think that's key, and I think that my teams, when I speak to them on Teams or Zoom, we have a frank exchange of conversation as to, I'm not a technical expert, so, I will obviously take the solution architect's lead on the technical constraints and challenges, but I say, as a user, as a product, that this is what I want. How can we marry the two up?
Yeah, bringing people together.
Yeah.
Yes.
There's a book. I don't know whether anyone here has heard of it. It's called The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team.
Yeah.
Anyone?
Patrick Lencioni.
No? It's an amazing book. One of the core principles in that is this idea of a first team. So as a leader of a team, your team are actually your peers. They're not necessarily the people that you manage. And what you want is for those, the folks that you manage to become a team for each other. And I think it can be really challenging to build that sort of mentality, particularly if it's new to people. Have you had any experiences where you have fallen over or struggled building a team, whether it's a new team or you've come into an environment and you've had to inherit an existing team? How have you found that?
Many times over. Yeah. I think, I mean, it happens all the time, right? It happens all the time primarily because, so why does it happen? I won't take names, but why does it happen? It largely happens when you come in, when you step in, and there is a legacy team, and they have been in a habit of operating in a way, and you come in and you try to disrupt without understanding the institutional know-how, without knowing what has been working in this company historically and why it has been working historically. I learned it the hard way. After failing, after inheriting a team, after failing, and when like half of the team left, and that's when I realized, okay, this is not working. So next time when I did, I actually first learned what has been working in this organization historically, and why it has been working, why these changes were done. And despite this, in the second organization, we were going through a turnaround, I was able to retain the people who were essential to the turnaround.
Yeah, because you listened and didn't go in thinking that you knew everything already.
Yeah.
I think everybody's probably done that at some point in their career, made assumptions and then done that. Okay, so one of the things that we discussed before was how the tech environment recently has changed quite a lot. So if we'd been doing this session even just a few months ago, we'd have been talking about, you know, how we hang on to the best possible talent, how we compete with people with massive budgets, VC funding, etc. And of course, now we're in an environment where there are layoffs. People are a little bit more scared. Aya, have you got any words of wisdom for us on that?
That's a hard one, I think. I think it's about transparency and providing the support, you know, if, you know, those layoffs and, you know, need to happen. And unfortunately, sometimes in this current climate, economic climate, they have to happen. It's slightly, you know, there's more uncertainty there was probably, say, even 6 months ago. But I think ultimately it's about clearly communicating to your teams and to the, you know, to your staff, I guess, about what is going on. I think that's key, really, and you know, and as and when you are able to share that information with your teams, you know, you do that as quickly as possible. I think that's, you know, I think I've been on the receiving end, and I've been, you know, I've done that on the giving end as well. So I think that for me, you know, it's good to, like, I think what makes people nervous is the lack of information and lack of clarity. So I think obviously you can't be transparent 100% all of the time. That's impossible, especially with things like this. Obviously you need to consult HR, you need to consult various other people in the organisation, but whatever you're able to provide your teams, I think it's imperative that you share them as quickly as possible, and also keep your door open so that if they have any concerns, you know, they can really come and reach out to you, you know.
Yeah, checking in with them, making sure that they're feeling okay as well as looking okay.
Yes,
yeah,
absolutely. It's very hard to do virtually, I think.
It is really hard over Zoom. One of the things I read recently was about something called the SCARF model, And it's all about how humans behave when we feel threatened and what happens in our brain. And one of the key triggers is certainty. So if you feel that something might be unfair, if you feel like you might lose your autonomy or you feel like things are uncertain, it can be really tricky to deal with those threat responses. And I think you're right. If we are empathetic, if we listen, if we make sure that we're available, we hear what people are saying, it can really help. And Cor, you must have been through something similar, I'm sure.
So just like I've been at both the side of the tables,
Yeah.
right? And whatever she said, it's bang on, right? What people are not expecting. So this is perhaps my third recession, right? And recession used to come in the waves of 10 years. Now, because of man-made reasons or whatever, right? It now comes like every 2 years, right? Yeah, people don't. I don't think people, when they work in startups, they are expecting certainty. What they are expecting is that you be transparent to them, right? And they expect respect. They want you to treat them with respect, which is very easy thing to give, to be very honest, in an environment like this. One thing which is also happening is the definition of success will keep on changing, right? If we were in early, like you rightly said, right? If we were speaking in early 2022, companies which were growing at 200%, right? For the same companies, today VCs must be saying, hey, you know what? Why were these people not prioritizing profitability on growth? Right? So the definition is changing dramatically. So yeah. So and this success definition will change right after the exec team. It will change for product team and for the commercial team.
Do you think you need a different type of product manager depending on the definition of success, or is it about the adaptability of the people that you have?
I think it is dependent on how flexible you are to pivot and align yourself to the organizational strategy. One thing which I've realized is that a lot of product managers do not know how to read a P&L. Right? So, I mean, I'm not saying this should be a basic skill, but looking at how the market changes, right? Perhaps this should be a basic skill.
Yeah, being able to answer the question, how do we make money?
Precisely.
Yeah, I guess if you're measured on revenue growth, you should at least have an understanding of the bottom line as well. Because you're right, the tides change frequently. Definitely, I understand that. Okay, Aya, I think you mentioned earlier about alignment and getting stakeholders engaged. How much of that do you see as your role as a leader, and how much do you encourage your teams to do themselves?
That's a very good question. I think I see that as my sort of more my role. I think it depends on the situation, but I think generally speaking, I think it's more the product manager's role. The managing expectation side and sort of the process and the governance around sort of product, I think, is the product manager's role. In terms of speaking about the technical, like the solution itself and what we're recommending, as when the business requirements have come through, I definitely encourage my teams to present back to the business. I think I prefer my teams to focus on, what they're very good at is, creating products and building products really, and making that right recommendation around, that product, and also explaining them why from a more of a technical standpoint. So I think that's how I currently work, but I think it depends on the teams as well. Obviously I don't currently have them, but when I had design teams, obviously they would make present designs back to the business as well and back to wider stakeholders. So, but I definitely encourage my teams to kind of present back to the business as well. Like I shouldn't be the only person interfacing with the business.
Yeah, I think it's important for them to hear from different types of stakeholders as well.
Absolutely,
Directly.
yeah, absolutely.
I think one of the things that we've we've put in place. As I mentioned earlier, we've got 22 million members around the world. And when I joined YouGov, it's about 18 months ago now, we were surveying them, because we're a survey company, so of course we do that. We weren't really talking to them. So it'd been a while since anybody had picked up the phone and had a chat with one of these folks that completes surveys in their spare time for points. And I think it can be quite scary for teams, when they're not used to that level of engagement to do it. But you learn so much, of course. But that has been useful for our product managers, for our engineers, for our designers, just to hear from those customers directly. And then they can feed that into the work that they're doing. So it is essential. So I'm going to ask you some questions about horror stories now, because everybody loves those. Aya, just to you first, what have you found in your experience so far to be the biggest barrier to building like a winning team?
Onboarding, I think, is a big challenge, especially in a large organization. From the time we realize we need, more people to actually having them sign the contract and onboarding them can take a very long time, and things can change in between that time. So that is a massive challenge. I think also sometimes I own the product, but I have different teams that I'm not directly responsible for managing those, developing those products. And that can be sort of challenging as well, because obviously large organization matrix teams. So along with the time zone challenges, there's all those other challenges as well. But that's what I've discovered in more recent times in terms of sort of onboarding and making sure that, because obviously I think that, as an organization, if it takes too long, obviously, people will move on. As simple as that.
Yeah, I can get that. I mean, have you had anybody commit to joining and then pull out before joining?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
It's definitely happened. I think it's happened multiple times for me, unfortunately. And I have, unfortunately, no control over it.
You feel like you're back to square one?
Yes.
But almost worse, because you've built up an expectation and a hope that things will move forward. And
also we plan with that additional sort of headcount or resource in mind, person in mind.
Yeah.
And 3 months later the landscape is different, and it's not quite back to square one, but it's pretty close.
It feels like it.
Yes.
Yeah, we had similar earlier this year, where we had engineers commit to joining and then they didn't. And we actually had a few people leave in quick succession, and it starts to affect the morale of the entire team. So engineers, designers, product managers all thinking, oh my gosh, is there a mass exodus? Do I need to be worried? And I think getting your arms around the team and making sure that they feel, safe, secure, which sounds really warm and fuzzy, but actually it's crucial. Ankur, any horror stories of barriers you want to share?
Yeah. Perkworks problem is a little different. I mean, I've been in companies where there were distributed time zones, but here the team is largely based in UK. But problems have the challenges come in because now we've become hybrid, we've become remote, and the company who was used to having a culture wherein everybody could just tap at people's back and get an answer, now has to reinvent their culture, need to learn how to write, to codify things, and not just send a Slack message to get an MR approved, right? Right from, resetting this culture wherein people should write to think, to not, product managers need to be able to get direct access to speak to customers, so that customer success can get involved, but product managers should be able to talk to to customers directly. They should not be outsourcing or insourcing this, because there is a user experience team, like you said. They should pick up the phone and talk, right? I mean, off the top of my head, I can say these are the generic challenges, of course, yes. There would always someone who would come in and say, can you build this solution because our largest customer is asking for it? And that's where you need culture commitment rather than a commitment from from the product leader or from the CEO, right? So yeah.
I'll share my horror story with you. I won't name the company. So it was an eye-opening, quite rewarding experience. It was my first day at a new job, my first sort of official product owner role. And I walked in, said hello to everyone, and was told the CEO had resigned the previous week. They'd just done a launch of a big new product, complete revamp, put it in the cloud. And it was a platform that brought together businesses and then end users. And the PMs had focused entirely on those business users. So they built this fantastic product. It was for social housing landlords. And they'd forgotten about the tenants, who were the ones that ultimately had to use this thing. And they were revolting. So I was told, CEO just resigned. They're kicking off on Facebook. There's a change.org petition to bring back the old version of this product. The product director, so my boss, had been spending her evenings reading Facebook comments from people who were really angry. And I was completely new to this. I'd done marketing, comms before, but product was new. And honestly, it was terrifying, but I learned so much there about how to... The only way you can survive an experience like that is to actually listen to the end users, to talk to them. So with my complete lack of experience, no idea what I was doing, I did an Ask Me Anything on Facebook one evening with my face, put it out there, and we got thousands of questions. We got people asking, can we bring back the old site? This is why we liked it. These are all the things that it did that worked for us. And that was interesting, learned a lot. I was lucky I wasn't burdened by the baggage. It hadn't been my release. But we basically then spent as a team the next 12 weeks listening to that feedback and coming up with a solution that kept the landlords happy, but also addressed the tenant concerns. It really pushed the team forward. They felt like, actually, we can make a difference here. And we ended up putting our most angry, frustrated folks in a little sort of super group of users. We had a closed Facebook group, put them in there and let them vent to us there so they weren't ranting so publicly. And then we actually finished the work just before Christmas that year. And we thanked everyone. We went through the Facebook AMA, and we thanked everyone that had given us feedback by name in this email, and managed to release it all with like a 12 Days of Christmas theme. And I think that was terrifying and a really scary thing to walk into on my first day. But it really taught me how teams can be incredible when they work together. It was engineers, it was designers, it was a mix of onshore, offshore engineers. We had to get buy-in from the senior leadership because we wanted to spend 3 months worth of development resource on this. But we learned loads. And I think that sort of, you were talking about it, those cultural elements, so making sure you've got the buy-in from the top, making sure that your teams are on board, that they feel safe, that they feel happy is all crucial. So kind of brings us to what could be a real challenge certainly in much smaller organisations. How the product function and the CEO work together. So do you want to explain how that works at Perkbox?
Right. So I think it's not just a smaller organization challenge. It's across the board. So one of the biggest myth, it's not the biggest perhaps, it's one of the myths of corporate culture is that culture is bottoms up. Culture is always top down. It's not the most democratic thing to say. It's not the most likable thing to say, but it's the truth of corporate organizations. the reason why I'm saying this, what does that mean actually? It basically means that whatever the exec team is going to, however the exec team is going to behave and operate, is going to trickle down, and is how their senior leadership is going to behave, and is how the organization is going to behave. Case in point is Elon Musk, right? This is how he behaves. His senior director of engineering calls people on Slack dead weight. People who have just left have been called back, and then he publicly apologizes in all hands. Right? Now, sorry to all the fans of Elon Musk here, but that's the whole thing, right? So if a CEO of an organization says, hey, you know what, our sales strategy is driven by what our product strategy is, and then influences the roadmap, goes back and influences the roadmap based on whatever the largest customer is asking for, then rest assured that is what the sales team is going to do, that is what the customer success team is going to do, that is what the marketing team is going to do. So it is not enough to have a commitment between the CEO and the product. It is also needed. There's also a need to go back as a product leader, as a product manager. There's also a need to go back and codify that commitment. Perhaps remind not just the CEO but the exec team that this is what we signed up for together. Perhaps write a product strategy together. Perhaps write the organization strategy together. Have a stamp of CEO on it. That will help product team have a leverage when such kind of request would come in. And that doesn't mean that you shouldn't listen to the CEO when they come up with a solution, right? But that essentially means that next time when they would come with a solution, you can say, hey, you know what, this is what the strategy says, and this is the reason why I think we should not do this. What do you think? Right? You would have a rebuttal for it.
Yeah, that makes sense. And Aya, you're working in a much larger organization now. So how does product as a function and your exec team work at Warner?
I think the bottom line is that, they just want to know that everything works,
Yeah.
They just want to know that we're selling tickets. We're not getting complaints to call center. We're not getting, like you had on your Facebook pages, complaints on social media. Our ratings are, like customer satisfaction ratings are consistently high. As long as those things are clear, I think that's what, they're too busy. They're not interested in the details. It's about, can we sell tickets online? Of course, yes or no. And, I think that's the level of involvement,
That's really interesting.
Yeah, to my knowledge, I've not been there very long.
Yeah.
But generally, I think it's, I think people tend to remember the bad things, but people don't really remember the good things.
Yeah, they just expect you to keep the lights on.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that it's important that, so I think, we all make sure that, things are running smoothly at the end of the day.
I think we have a different challenge, and it's not what I expected when I joined YouGov. So our CEO is a founder. So he founded the company about 20 odd years ago. And his first sort of role within the business was the guy in charge of innovation. So he is almost the product guy. And he is interested in the detail. He does want to know that the experience is excellent. And he does care, and he does want to hear from our users. And I think that has been it's a challenge sometimes to manage that relationship, but I would take that in a heartbeat over a CEO that felt distant and didn't feel like they cared, and I've worked in that kind of environment as well. But also, I appreciate that I've had CEOs say, I don't care about the data, I want. So I know the data's showing this over here, but actually my gut feeling's saying we're going over there. And that could be a really tricky thing to manage as a product manager. Have you had any sort of experience where you've had to push back against sort of really senior leadership type folks, either of you?
Yes, multiple.
Yes,
I think, multiple times. I think that's part of our sort of jobs if you're in product management, I think.
Any tips?
I think half the challenge is listening to them. I think it's about listening first and foremost, and say, okay, I hear you, and I'm not saying that if someone wants to go in a different direction to what the data says, I don't think that's necessarily the wrong thing. Yeah. Obviously they are experts in their field as well, and they've been in that position. They are there for a reason. I think so. I think it is worth listening, but I think it's always should be a conversation.
Yeah.
And say, well, actually, so we've listened, but the data is saying X, but you're saying Y. So why don't we do Z, whatever Z may be?
Or you can, I think they were talking about it yesterday, the minimum MVP, minimum lovable product as well.
Yeah.
What's the smallest, easiest, quickest way that we can get to an answer on this where there's disagreement? So how can we test?
I definitely say a lot of the time that we can discuss the large ticket items, at a later date, but actually the quick wins are, A, B, C, and D. And then I think most people are, most of the time are open to that conversation. Yeah. I think the business generally likes quick wins.
Yeah, we don't we all. Ankur, anything to add to that?
So there are there are two type of conversations which are conversations, and one is shut up and do it. Yeah. Right? Nobody talks about shut up and do it because those are not politically correct things to do, but they're stuff which are going to happen, right? So yeah, conversation is what I say is that's how they need to be dealt with. You ship some quick win, get some data out and prove it which way it needs to be gone. But then there would always be stuff. I used to work with one of the competitor of Warren Brothers, and we were building their, which is now today, now I'm talking like way back in 2011, right? We were building their prime football property. Okay. And the prime discussion or detail was that the SVP wanted a black banner, just like it shows up on CNN, right? Very specific design feedback. And eventually, that's how it was done. Yeah. Right? So
get it done.
Yeah, because, so sometimes you just get it done.
Call that the pink flamingo. Yeah. If you want a pink flamingo on your website, you can have a pink flamingo on your website. You get to a point where actually you're costing more time, effort, energy, resource, fighting something that's going to happen, and you have to know when to pick your battles, which could be really tricky. 100%. And I think that's probably one of the hardest lessons to learn as a PM. I think we're going to start taking questions. We've only got one so far, but feel free to add any questions. We've meandered a little bit around the topic. So if there's anything you wanted us to pick up, please ask. So the question is, when onboarding new members into a winning team, as PMs, what can we do to help the member align with the culture, to challenge and give their ideas? Aya, any thoughts on that?
I think that sort of align with the culture. I think it's about communication and making sure they, have those fundamental details, how the team operates, how we work, and do they understand that? And I've also experienced teams where we pair the developers, engineers, so that they have that sort of buddy sort of system really, and they can set up their environments and do what they need to get to the point where they feel comfortable solving problems within the team, and also you get to know them really.
Yeah, that's important. Yeah. Ankur?
I think one of the, usually we didn't have a process initially, so we kind of started publishing our onboarding doc. I think one thing which the usual stuff in the onboarding doc, which is org design, buddy, and meetings which is set up for next 2 weeks, you should go and spend some time with the customer happiness team and stuff like that. But one thing which I started contributing to it was I started with something called, and I had written it when I joined Perkbox, called Ankur's User Guide, which was essentially a kind of a user manual. You can get a template for it on internet. A lot of people write it now, which basically talks about, okay, who am I, what are my strengths, what are my weaknesses, etc. And then I started encouraging other leaders also in my team to write it. And I started plugging all those user guides into the onboarding. So when the person would come in, he would instantly get an idea of what kind of people he's going to work with. And he can get an unfiltered version of it.
Yeah, it's like a manual of me,
It's a
I think
manual,
I've heard it
yeah,
called,
exactly,
yeah.
yeah.
And I think that's a really good idea. I think one of the things I wanted to pick up with on this question is around challenge. So encouraging new people who are unburdened by history, don't have the legacy in your organisation or your department to actually challenge. And if they see something that doesn't quite look right, how do they feel able to say it? And I've had a new member of my team join recently. She's over there. And I think that is really crucial, actively seeking that feedback. If you see something that looks bizarre, that you think could be improved, whether it's a process or something, please flag it. I'm really encouraging that behaviour. But yeah, we do something similar. We use, some people like it, some people don't, but Myers-Briggs. We have our MBTI types on our Slack profiles. And we've talked about them as a team and had a little giggle about the areas where we're similar and different. And certainly if you can put things in place that help that person feel at home, supported, so people know how to interact with him or her, it can work really well. How do you get, so we've got, changing from a project manager to a product manager. Have either of you done that?
Yes.
Yes. Do you want to share?
I think project management is all more about, making sure, the delivery timelines are matching. I don't think project managers, I'm not saying all, but in my experience, they don't question the why. It's more about how do we get there, or when do we get there, sorry. And can we get there within budget, within the time constraints, what are the dependencies? It's more looking at it as sort of looking at the timetable of things, as opposed to asking, why are we doing this? And how do we do this? So I think that's the major difference. Luckily in my career, I was able to sort of do a bit of a blend not currently, but probably about 8 years ago. Yeah. I was kind of forced to do it because I'm bilingual in Japanese and English, and that's what made me kind of do a bit of both. So I was hired as a project manager more, but I had to actually understand the product because I had to explain it in 2 different languages. Yeah. Obviously, that's a unique situation. I don't recommend it, but yes, I think that's the difference.
I heard an analogy the other day from someone, which was if you think of an orchestra doing a concert, the project manager is the person that makes sure there's enough chairs for the orchestra. They make sure that the tuba player has turned up with the tuba, that the right music is on the right stand, but they're not the composer and they're not the conductor. And that's your role as the PM, is to actually create the music. And I really like that. It was quite sweet analogy. And I think sometimes organisations can get these things confused, project and product. I've heard people use the terms interchangeably, and they are fundamentally different. I think when you have seen a product manager or product owner in action, you don't confuse them again. That sense of ownership and ability to make decisions and not take them to change boards is a huge difference.
Yeah, I think product managers tend to sort of, I like to think that product managers care about the product, whereas I'm not saying project managers don't, but I think they're more about, can we get this new feature on time?
Yeah. Any final thoughts before we wrap up?
No.
No? Okay, thanks very much, guys. Thank you all for listening.
Thank you.